Alright, howdy folks. Hopefully you see me a little bit better. There's some, finally got some camera lighting that would illuminate me a little bit better. So we're doing this whole classics from the Criterion collection. And there's several films I could still pick from in order to do this. So tonight we're going to begin tonight's journey with a film from 1964 starring the Fab Four themselves. It is A Hard Day's Night. Yes, there's a little bit of a story behind this about why this is in the Criterion collection. So this went into the collection in 2014 in a super deluxe packaging. So and there's tons of features on this set about the making of the film itself, and of course it was completely digitally restored for this purpose as well as a theatrical release. So more about that later. So for right now, we're going to take a look at, from 1964, John, Paul, George, and Ringo, and directed by Richard Lester, originally released by United Artists. It is A Hard Day's Night. So that was A Hard Day's Night from 1964, starring the Beatles, directed by Richard Lester. This movie is just, wow, this still holds up, and it's just nothing but fun. It's nothing but fun. It's just, how do I describe this movie? Is that this movie, other than, the only way I could describe it is that this movie set the precedent for what music genre themed movies are to be. It set the tone for music artists making their own movies. And now this isn't really a biopic by any stretch, nor is it a mockumentary, because you know, they've announced that coming to theaters is a long-awaited sequel to This Is Spinal Tap. Well, Spinal Tap is a parody of, it's called a mockumentary, which means Spinal Tap was not a real band, even though that they created those characters and created a band and created music and albums to tie into that movie. But Michael McKean, Harry Shearer, Christopher Guest, and those guys are the guys that created those characters, but they could also play music and create a mockumentary, which makes fun of British heavy metal bands. But the Beatles did something that set this ignited, and it wasn't their idea. This was never their idea. They were just, you know, the four young lads from Liverpool who loved they loved rock and roll, and particularly they loved the music that was coming out of the United States. And what had happened was, while they were in England, they were starting to make their records in England, and they were really, really getting pop. They were building their momentum then. And so much so that when United Artists heard of this, they said to a famous film producer that was living in England at the time. I'm trying to think. But anyway, he was living in England at the time, and said, "Have you heard of these kids called the Beatles?" And he said, no. He said, yeah, they're kind of getting, I don't listen to the music, but they're kind of getting popular here. And the executives at United Artists said, we want to make a movie with them. And we know they're already making hit records. They're about to come to the United States. Now they're signed to EMI, Capitol Records, here in the United States, and it was, I forget what other record, but EMI, internationally. So they were on that label, but we're wanting to finance a film with them, have them star, but we need music. And that's how it started. We're gonna release the soundtrack album as well. And so there was a deal worked out to where that the Beatles would write 6 new songs to be incorporated into the film, and they said, and the Beatles were like, well, what's the movie going to be about? And we're like, we don't know, but just make the music that you want to make, and we'll fit it into the film. And with that, some big hits came. Songs like She Loves You, Can't Buy Me Love, Hard Day's Night were like the 3 big hit singles. And of course the film was directed by Richard Lester, who's also an American living in England. And he's made several films throughout the years. He made The Three Musketeers, Superman's 2 and 3. So, but yeah, and this film was, again, this set the standard for how music-themed movies are to be. Not only that, it was the blueprint for music videos. Bet you didn't know that. But yeah, it was a blueprint to music videos. There was another film that came out later that came out much later in the late 70s that was also kind of a blueprint to way music videos were edited. So, yeah, a Hard Day's Night. Now, I can't recommend this movie enough. It's a great movie. It's a funny movie. That's the other thing, that this was not really, like I said, it's not a mockumentary. It's full dramatic. It had a screenplay, and it was not done in documentary style. It's just like, here's the story. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. You know, here's, we're introduced, hey, there's these 5 young lads, or these 4 young, why am I saying 5? 4 young lads from Liverpool who are great musicians, and they're being shoved into cars, shoved into rooms, shoved into trains, shoved into rooms, shoved into, you know, wherever, and they're trying to avoid getting caught by the police for doing mischievous activity, because there's one of the comic relief parts in this film is that Paul McCartney has a grandfather that is tagging along, but the grandfather is a bit of a con artist. And so he's constantly like pickpocketing and scalping and all this stuff to swindle, and makes people believe that he's trying to make people believe that he's high ranking and all this and that. It's quite funny. But now about this release. This is Criterion Spine number 711. So there you go. 711. This is a Blu-ray and DVD set, so this is a really big set. You know, the book here is just massive. about the making of the film. Now, how did Criterion end up with A Hard Day's Night? Here's the interesting thing. This film has been... The rights to this film are, I think, 100% in the hands of the Beatles, Apple Corp. I'm not entirely sure, but because in the year 2000, the film was re-released theatrically by Miramax Films. Like I said, this was a United Artists release originally, but it was re-released by Miramax Films, and they had done a restoration with the picture and sound, and now Criterion was hired, or was brought on, to do this 2014 release, in which they also went back to the original film sources and soundtrack, completely restored and digitally remastered the sound for a 5.1 DTS surround sound mix. So it was also for a limited time in Selective City, re-released, released that way through Criterion's label Janus Films, their parent company. So, yeah. And I was kind of hoping that more Beatles films would see the light of day on Blu-ray, because this is the only one that's made it to Blu-ray. I don't know. I know the Yellow Submarine made it to DVD back in the early 2000s through MGM, because United Artists was mostly their studio of choice when they made movies with the Beatles. So, but yeah, A Hard Day's Night. Do check this movie out if you haven't. It's a great movie, and it's a landmark film, and I'm great that Criterion put this out. So it's not cheap, but they did make it available. So with that, let's go on to the next feature. Okay, so we just finished watching The Beatles and A Hard Day's Night, which is on the Criterion Collection. So now we're going to take a look at a film from 1934. This is a film I've heard briefly about this movie. It was referenced in an episode of MASH, which I watched when I was younger, and I watched it with Dad. And there was an episode in which the Major Winchester is kind of upset. And when isn't he upset? He's upset at the whole camp, and he's not speaking to anybody, so he takes a bed blanket and puts it over a piece of string, and just kind of isolate himself from his two roommates, Hawkeye Pierce and B.J. Honeycutt. And I had no idea what they were referencing, and when Hawkeye walks in, he goes, "I've seen this movie. Clark Gable was over here, and Claudette Colbert was right over here." Well, that comes from this film right here. It is from 1934, directed by Frank Capra, one of my favorite directors, of classic films. It Happened One Night. Yeah, matter of fact, Criterion chose the photo in reference. So, yeah, this was originally released by Columbia Pictures, 1934. And I have actually yet to watch this. I've had this in my collection for quite some time. So, and Frank Capra is one of my favorite directors, of classic films, definitely. Because I loved Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and I love It's a Wonderful Life, and then you have Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, which That's a different, that's some of the films that he's made. But this is the one that's in, one of them that's in the Criterion collection. It is Spine number 736, again from 1934 in Columbia Pictures. Here's Frank Capra's It Happened One Night. Alright, so that was It Happened One Night, from 1934, starring Claudette Colbert and Clark Gable. Now this film, I think this is, I don't know where this fell in terms of just overall movie making, but it seems like this movie has been the inspiration of several of romantic comedies that have happened throughout the years. And from even a movie like Spaceballs would take something from this a little bit, because what we have in this film is Claudette Colbert plays Ellie Andrews, and she's this spoiled, rich. She's the daughter of a rich, guy. I don't know what you would call him, but she's she's inherited to a lot of money, and she is pledged to be married to another guy with the name of, whose first name is King. So, if that tells you anything, but she is not happy. She does not want to marry this guy. He's significantly older than her, and so she's just not happy, and finds a way to escape by jumping off of the boat and swimming to shore, and buying a bus ticket that would hopefully take her to New York City. Well, and she meets Clark Gable, his character, who's a reporter by the name of Pete, and he's also trying to get back to New York, but he's a struggling reporter. He doesn't have a lot of money, so he's at the kind of the opposite end of the spectrum. And they meet on this bus, and one thing, at first glance they don't get along, and Ellie gets off the bus when they take a 30-minute break for breakfast, because this is a bus that travels through the night. They call it a night bus. Drives through the night to get to their destination. So she misses the bus by 20 minutes. The bus driver did not wait for her, and so they end up taking another bus that leaves 12 hours later. And over time, the father puts out a reward to, hey, find my daughter. She's pledged to be married to this other rich guy, and so on and so forth. And so Clark Gable, Pete, he figures out, hey, I've got a story here. And so it also leads to them missing rides, having to hitchhike, doing all sorts of crazy things. But also the bedroom, the reason why it's kind of a chastity thing that he does here, it's to respect the privacy and wishes of both sides. So he sets up this blanket in the middle of the room, calling it the Walls of Jericho. And he knows, hey, there's a woman opposite sex. I'm a man, so we put this up. You know, we don't cross those barriers. And then, and of course, over time, they do fall in love with each other, but he first thinks that she's a spoiled brat. She wants everything kind of kept on the down low, and she's just trying to escape the life that she has. And it's a very well done movie. It's to me, I don't know if it was the first of its kind. I don't know where it fell in terms of the history of romantic comedies, but obviously you've seen other films like in recent years that would take from this, you know, from like date night type movies. Like I said, even Spaceballs kind of takes from it a little bit, because the, you know, Lone Star and Princess Vespa hate each other, but by the end they're marrying each other. It's and it's a road movie, so it, because they're trying to get to New York, and yeah, they're trying to get to New York, and things just happen. They miss their buses, they start hitchhiking, and it's just one thing after another. So it's just kind of this hijinks thing. But also, I kind of watched a little bit of the bonus content that Criterion has here, and there are some features that are produced by Criterion, and then there's features that they have ported over from Sony Pictures, what they had. And one of the features is called it's an interview with Frank Capra and how he remembers it happened one night. And he said that it wasn't a troubled production, but it was kind of a movie that was done very fast. Because Claudette Colbert wanted double her normal salary. She normally asked for, at the time, $24,000, and she wanted double that. She wanted about $50,000, and the whole budget of the movie was $300,000. This was in 1934. So, and Clark Gable came over from MGM, and Gable, this was really against Gable's type, because Clark Gable was, at the time, the big leading man. He was the leading man. He was the good-looking guy, the heroic guy. So, and by this film, he's kind of, even though him and Claudette Colbert, their characters come together, they get married, and they fall in love with each other, but the whole entire time he kind of puts her down a little bit, and they say, hey, you're a spoiled brat, and he calls her brat throughout the entire movie. And this is where I think the movie does not hold up, is how he does kind of talk to her. But he's also, at the same time, he's like paying for her tickets, and he's kind of barely bailing her out of situations, and but eventually he does fall for her. So. Yeah, so I do encourage everyone to check this movie out. It is a fairly, it is a good film. It's been borrowed from throughout, you know, in several romantic comedies throughout the years, and so you'll sit down and watch it and go, oh, I've seen that before in this movie, and I've seen that before in this other movie. So that's the type of movie. This is pretty early on in 1934. So, but yeah, do check it out. It Happened One Night. Again, spine number 736 in the Criterion collections. Just look for that cover. So, let's move on to the next feature. Well, here it is, the next feature, and wait a minute. We need to fix something here. Yes, we need to be in color for this one because this film is from 1948. It is in the Criterion collection. It's probably one of the most influential films to what I would say modern filmmakers, like the filmmakers that I grew up on. And this is a film that definitely they look to for inspiration. It's the original Technicolor masterpiece from 1948, The Red Shoes. Yeah, directed by Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger. It's just a classic film we're going to take a look at this time around. And of course, in the collection, it is number 44 in the Criterion collection. So sit back, relax. From the Rank Corporation in England, here is Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger's The Red Shoes. So that was The Red Shoes from 1948, loosely based on the Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale of the same name. But they incorporate that into the ballet of the film. This is a film that definitely has the whole tragic love story that's it's definitely tragic with this film of what takes place, because you have this great performer. She's beautiful performer with the character of Victoria Page, played by Maura Shearer. The whole time throughout the film is that she loves to dance in ballet, and then what happens? She falls in love. She falls in love with the composer Julian Craster, played by Marius Goring, and she's working with Boris Lamatov, played by Anton Walbrick, who's basically the producer of the ballet. And she's torn between her love of dance and the love of her husband. And it's a very tragic ending of, and so obviously she makes her choice at the end of the film, but obviously pays the ultimate price for it. Now, this film, you could tell that this was made when Technicolor was huge, and because the colors in this film really pop on screen. Now, unfortunately, the film over the years has suffered major deterioration issues, and that's why Criterion got a hold of it through, actually it goes through the Film Foundation. Now the Film Foundation was headed up by Martin Scorsese and Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, and several other directors. But it was really Martin Scorsese that said, hey, we need to protect our film heritage. And there's a lot of important films that need to be restored, and The Red Shoes is one of those films. It's one of Scorsese's favorites, as well as Brian De Palma's, Steven Spielberg, and so on. Even Roger Ebert has on his, or had it on his list of the best movies that he's ever seen. I think it's the greatest movies list. That's according to Roger Ebert. So, this is a very beautiful film. That I will say. I mean, I'm not taking anything when I say that's according to Roger Ebert, but this is a very beautiful film. This is a very beautiful looking film. And even though it's very tragic in the ending, it's a very beautiful looking film. The colors, the way it's acted, the way the whole presence of everything that takes place. And critics will say that over the past years, ballet has never looked so good on film. This is the best that it's ever going to look on film. They've tried to do it several other times and to no success. Other mediums. Ballet works best when it's on stage and not in any other medium, but in here it's where it works best with The Red Shoes. And of course, the film, like I said, the film had gone through some major deterioration issues, including mold on the film, and this was Technicolor in its earlier days. By the time you got to the 1950s, Technicolor was, it was color film stock, but how it worked was how film worked, at least by the time that I came along, went to the movies. It was a one strip color stock ordeal. But when The Red Shoes, The Wizard of Oz had similar problems, and those earlier Technicolor films, it was a huge camera that required 3 strips of film to be run through it. One for red, one for green, one for blue. The 3 primary colors, red, green, and blue. And that had to be calibrated in the camera, run through simultaneously. And they were single black and white records, okay? Then they would use a dye process. One film would be dyed blue, the other next one would be dyed green, and the third one would be dyed red. So when they put these elements together on a single strip of film, it would form a full color presentation. And so it was Scorsese that has kept this film in the public's eye, because they had to take great care and great pride in restoring this film. And I can see why it's many, like I said, many of the people from the 70s that were coming up in the 70s, like Scorsese, De Palma, and Spielberg, and let's see who else. They were heavily influenced by this film. Yeah, Francis Ford Coppola. So it's one of those movies that it definitely needs to be studied in its technical and performance fields. I mean, it's there. I mean, this is the type of movie that you would never see made, definitely not see made anymore. Just because of, I think, because people over the years have kind of lost sight of what is quality filmmaking. And there was a lot of technical and performance care that went into this film, because it's, like I said, it's a beautiful film. It does have a tragic ending to it, but it is a beautiful film. The Maura Shear, she wasn't even an actress. She was 100% a ballet dancer. They found her and they thought, well, can you read and memorize lines? Can you give a performance dramatically in front of a film camera? And absolutely she can. And of course, her ballet came natural to her. So, but yeah, The Red Shoes, and of course I watched the Ultra 4K HD version. This has been in the collection for some time. I can't. It says 2021 when the film was restored, or not restored, but at least put into the collection. But some of the footage that they, maybe that's when the 4K transfer was done. But like they talk about in the special features, like this was restored around 2010, 2011-ish. Because that's when they presented it to the BFI theatrically in England. And they were talking about Shutter Island in a current status. So that's how long, Shutter Island came out, at least 10 years, around that time. Well over 10 years ago, like 2010, 2011. So, and I think what also helped is that Scorsese's longtime editor, Thelma Shoemaker Powell, her late husband was one of the directors of this. So I think it was important for him to, as a friend of hers and colleague, to properly restore the film. So do check it out, The Red Shoes, spine number 44 in the Criterion collection. Just look for Maura Shear's face there and the spine. So yeah, so let's go on to the next feature. Okay, so we're going to close this out with taking a look at one more film, and it is from 1936. It is the Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers classic, directed by George Stevens. It is Swing Time. Yeah, again from 1936. This was originally released by RKO Pictures and directed by George Stevens. It is spine number 979 in the Criterion collection. So, gather around. We're going to talk a little bit about this one. So, let's gather around and enjoy Swing Time. Alright, well that was Swing Time from 1936, starring Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers, directed by George Stevens. And this was their 6th collaboration. They had Fred and Ginger had done 10 films in their total collaboration. It's between the films that they've done at RKO and MGM. So obviously this was another pairing with them, and it was a hit at the time. Yeah, it was a pretty big hit at the time. And of course, in the film, Fred Astaire plays John Lucky Garnett. He's this gambler, and he's engaged to be married to another woman, Margaret Watson, and of course the father's not happy about the two are seeing each other, and and unless he comes up with $25,000, then the marriage will happen. Well, then here comes Ginger Rogers with her character, and her name is Penny. She's a dance instructor. But also Fred Astaire, also his main job is to dance, but also he's this gambler. And so the reason why he's given himself his name Lucky, because he's pretty lucky. And you see that throughout the film, how he's able to wheel and deal and get what he wants. You know, it may catch up to him later on, but he's able to go through the whole situation. Now, this is it's just got a sweet romantic dance vibe that was popular at the time. And of course, the girl who he's engaged to at the beginning of the film, turns out when Penny, Ginger Rogers, comes into his life and teaches him how to dance and how to be a partner, and he finds himself more and more in love with Penny than he is with Margaret. So so it has kind of a funny ending, how Penny is quickly whisked away to be engaged to another guy who's the conductor and composer of the nightclub, and then there's a running gag about why Lucky didn't get married at the beginning, that they pass on to the conductor with the whole idea with the pants that he's wearing doesn't have cuffs. It's not supposed to have cuffs. But it's quite funny, and this is a difficult film to categorize, if you were to say it, because it's a romance movie, it's a comedy, it's a musical. So yeah, I mean, it's a difficult film to put into a specific category, and that's not uncommon for films of that type. As a matter of fact, I'm thinking of a film that came out 10 years later with Miracle on 34th Street. You know, that was a heck of a time marketing that, because that's a Christmas film. Came out in the middle of July, but they had to be careful on how to market it. Was it a comedy? Was it a drama? Was it this? Was it that? So with Swing Time, it definitely goes into the musical category, and that's the way, you know, it was marketed as Fred and Ginger. You know, Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers. That's how it was marketed. So that's all they needed to really say, because they knew what they were going to get. They were going to get some comedy. They were going to get a romantic love story. They were going to get these great dance numbers. They were going to have these great songs, and so on and so forth. So, but yeah, unfortunately, what gives this movie kind of a bad rap is that this was also during the time when racial stereotyping was very heavy in films, and there's a key sequence in here in this film in which Fred Astaire dances, and it was supposed to be a tribute to Bill Bojangles Robinson was his name. I'm trying to look here. But anyway, he was a popular dancer at the time, and he was obviously he was black, okay, but at the same time, the way it was depicted, they felt that it was kind of mocking him and black people because Fred Astaire is wearing blackface, even though it has this great music number that he's dancing to, but the things were done not really thinking about how derogatory or offensive they could be. And so, yeah, that's what kind of gives this film kind of a bad mark over the years, is that we tend to label, there's things done back then that were wrong and that they should have known better, but they just didn't care. But that being said, that is the last film that we're going to do in this whole series. I do have one more segment that I do want to talk about, that it does kind of involve this, so stay tuned for that. So, well, I thought I'd take this time to go on a little speech, or whatever you want to call it. I wouldn't even call it necessarily just a rant or anything like that, because this is a subject I've been talking about for quite some time, definitely about censorship, but also what kind of ties into this is what we're allowed to do, or, well, I shouldn't say what we're allowed to do, but what we are kind of trended to do on the internet and YouTube in terms of the movie reviewing thing. Because right now, and you guys, those who you just saw this video, just saw me do a whole series of classics from the Criterion collection. Well, what's a classic movie? Basically, it's old movies, okay? I'm going to put that in a nutshell, okay? And these are movies that are very influential, that I thought, very influential, that are at least 60 years old, because I didn't talk about anything from the 70s. It was always 60s on back. Sweet Smell of Success, the Lady Eve, 12 Angry Men, Failsafe, and there's tons more that you could pick and talk about, but I just chose to do, keep it, within 3 videos, but also I wanted to bring this up because, who's to tell me that I can't talk about old movies on YouTube? No, it may not be the most popular thing, but you know what? I myself don't want to follow in with status quo. Because here's what I see. I see people that say, well, don't talk about old movies because you won't get the viewership. But then I see a ton of people who will do the first time viewing, first time reactions. And these people have Patreon accounts, like the whole, which was the whole Kickstarter thing. I don't do that because, yeah, I would like the viewership, but also that's twice as much more work too, because part of that is I could get subscribers to contribute to my channel and contribute to my work financially, but that also means I have to give those people a little bit something extra. And so I feel like I'm giving, my thing is to give my best up front, give everybody the same. But that's me. That may not be for you, because also, well, one of them in particular, I'm going to tie this into what I'm also getting at is that, I'll talk about old movies, I'll talk about new movies, but also here's a problem when you run into when you talk about old movies, is that you run the risk of the whole politically correct thing. And let me take you back 5 years when the pandemic was going on. Now this I'm going to pull from Bill Maher, his show Real Time with Bill Maher. And this is what Turner Classic Movies did. Turner Classic Movies, a channel that I would love to have, but don't currently have it on part of my cable, and because my cable is so expensive already, and I thought I could suffice it by just subscribing to HBO Max and hopefully that they would have the channel. Well, it turns out they just have the movies, but I also want the commentary. I want the things that they're talking about, so I can talk about something like that. But that being said, but if I'll take you back to 2020, 2021, remember when the pandemic was going on and that's when they really went into the woke DEI, how they were doing things, and they were talking about films in a certain light, and there was actually rumors that they were going to censor films. So instead they didn't. They showed the movies, and like Gone with the Wind was on. Gone with the Wind, Breakfast at Tiffany's, because of the Mickey Rooney character, My Fair Lady. There was another one. There was like a whole list of films. But let's take a look at what Bill had to say about that whole situation.
All right, so last week I was talking about, to change the subject completely, Turner Classics. They're the movie, I like Turner Classics.
Okay.
I once did a thing for them. But of course in this new era, they had to reframe the classics. So they have to have a guy come on at the beginning. Yeah, see, there it is. I'm not lying. And give a little speech about why movies that you used to just enjoy, because you understood that times change, people change, and mores change. It's called evolution, but now it's called problematic. Anyway, so yes, it's so obvious, you know. And Gone with the Wind is on the list. Breakfast at Tiffany's. My Fair Lady. My Fair Lady is too rough for them. It was too corny for me when I was 10. My father wanted me to go see it. I wouldn't. Okay. So, but those aren't just the only movies. Would you like to see some of the other ones that they have to give warnings to now? The classics? Oh, I'm sure you would. These are some of the other ones. I don't think these really need warnings, but they have it. Sleeping Beauty. A prince kisses an unconscious woman without consent. See there? The Wizard of Oz. A powerful woman of color is murdered by a rural white girl. Psycho inaccurately portrays the lives of the vast majority of transgender motel owners. Rosemary's Baby fails to present Planned Parenthood as a viable option. Jaws portrays white people as victims. Wrong. The Graduate depicts a problematic age discrepancy that you can't blame on the man. The Greatest Story Ever Told, yes. Warning portrays in a positive light a power imbalance between Mary, a Palestinian teenager, and God, a more powerful man. And, of course, Braveheart, warning, stars Mel Gibson.
Okay, so as he pointed out in kind of humorous fashion there, you know, he did the whole, no, those last ones with Sleeping Beauty and Jaws, those were jokes, okay? But that's not far-fetched to what would actually happen. You know, some of these people wanted to censor, well, like, we just watched Swing Time. That was one of the films on the list. Because of one key dance sequence that was in the film, the sequence is called Bojangles of Harlem, in which Fred Astaire puts on blackface. Now, I agree with that. That shouldn't have been done, but you are mesmerized by the great dance steps that whole sequence that he's doing. And now Fred Astaire, I don't know what his thinking was at the time, and I don't think Fred Astaire was a racist, but he was doing what he was told to do, and by play that part in the movie. And but trigger warnings, okay? I think, you know, definitely with trigger warnings is, look, here I have example, and these are all examples from Ted Turner, and from Ted Turner's company, Turner Entertainment, Time Warner, okay, or Warner, whatever they are now, Warner Media, who owns TCM, and they own the MGM library from the 1950s. They own the RKO library, and well, I have here some examples. Tom and Jerry. Okay, here's a couple of Tom and Jerry DVD sets that I have, and it's featuring some of the classic, it's a collection of some of their famous cartoons. And on the back, and I'm just going to read to you one of them. On the back, there is a little warning about this set. And it says, and I quote, Tom and Jerry Golden Collection Volume 1, which is what this one is called, is intended for the adult collector and may not be suitable for children. Same thing is said about the Deluxe Anniversary Collection. It says the same exact thing, just change the title. I used to watch those on TNT Saturday night during the 90s, 80s and 90s. These exact cartoons, as well as the Warner Brothers cartoons. Same thing is going on. But also, I'm gonna talk about the other thing is with the whole, you know, the old movies, shouldn't talk about it in the first time viewing. Well, just this past week, it made me think about I'm gonna combine all this together. This movie in particular has had more trigger warnings attached to it since it was released. There was a channel I was watching called Force of Light Entertainment, and the two young ladies that host that, Michelle and Natalie, they actually have names, but just look them up. Just look up their channel, Force of Light Entertainment. Well, this week they brought on a friend to watch the 1982 classic Poltergeist. And this movie has been slapped with trigger warnings since it was released because, one, it's been there's been mysterious deaths, and so they believe that the franchise is cursed. Also, who directed the movie? Was it Steven Spielberg or was it Tobe Hooper? Even though Tobe Hooper is credited, Steven Spielberg is producer. But there's been people said that Steven Spielberg was on the set every day. He gave direction, and so Steven Spielberg was the director. And that and also another thing was the rating. This came out in 1982, and it was pretty scary for a PG rated movie. You can read that. It's rated PG. At the time, when they first submitted the film, it was slapped with an R rating. Yeah. And they did not make any changes. All they did was petition to the MPAA and say, hey, we don't think it's that bad. Have another look. And they conceded and go, okay, it's a PG rated movie. Now, PG-13 was not around yet. That's why it went from the line being a cross between PG and R was very fine. But I'm watching these young people watch this film, and it just made me think of all kinds of things about, this was a pretty liberal film for the time. And I'll point out some things that take place in the film. First of all, the parents in the film are very, you can tell that they're the baby boomer generation. They talk about keeping an open mind about things. They talk about keeping an open mind about certain things. And what was there? Oh yeah, key scene. They're smoking pot in the bedroom next to the kids' bedroom. Yeah, and also the whole the big plot reveal is about, it involves real estate. If you haven't seen the film, it involves real estate, and that was something that Ronald Reagan was really pushing in the 80s. So the film is a criticism of Reaganomics. But here's the thing. If this movie came out today, it would be listed as too conservative. If it came out today, it would be listed as too conservative because even though the parents are baby boomers and doing all these weird things, that's because it depicts a nuclear family and how the love of the family and the strength of the family is what defeats the evil. The love of the family. Another liberal thing is that the mom is really the hero. The dad's kind of a bumbling idiot in some respects. But again, you have the depiction of the nuclear family. You have the father, the mother, and the children, the 3 children. Okay, so you have that going on. That's the nuclear family. That would label this film too conservative. But they haven't said anything about that. The only thing they've done is slapped one more warning, says, warning, this film contains sequences of flashing lights that may affect viewers who are susceptible to photosensitive epilepsy or other photosensitivities. Like the cover that they put on is not giving this away. Okay? So, that being said, I'm going to talk about what I want to talk about. Old or new movies. And we need to just sit back and just enjoy these movies for what they are. I mean, that's it. I mean, just enjoy because you understand. Let's keep the politics out of it. Because I'm kind of tired of talking about it. Yeah, this wouldn't hold up today, which I have done. I'm guilty as charged to that, but that's what it is. So, we're going to close out this video. So, from me to you, see you later.